Hello, you're here. That's great. I was wondering when you were going to turn up, and here you are. My name's Simon Jacobs. This is episode 219 of Adventures in Pop. And today I need you with your abacus and your calculator, and we're going to be talking Spotify facts and figures once again. It is a subject that comes around fairly regularly, but because they are undoubtedly the single biggest player in the entire music industry, it's not surprising that, from time to time we're going to focus attention on what they're up to and what they're communicating. And what I want to focus on today is a thing that they sent out. I'm sure that every artist on Spotify has received the same information. It's called Loud and Clear, and it's full of interesting, although I would say rather, carefully concocted, one-sided information that tells you basically how fabulous Spotify is. So stand by for that. But first, very quickly, as I'm recording this on a Friday, we've just had a new UK chart announced, and I just thought it's worth just for a second saying well done to Elton John and Brandi Carlile, an American country singer who is not particularly well known in the UK, but probably much better known in the States. The two of them have made an album. It's had very good reviews, and today this same album has got to number one in the UK album chart. This is Elton John's 10th UK number one album, and that includes some greatest hits packages, an album with Pnau, the Australian outfit. So it's not entirely, 10 original Elton John albums, but it is the 10th time that he has hit number one over the last, God knows how many years, 50 years. And well done. Look, I don't talk about Elton John that much. I love him. I think he's absolutely marvellous. I wouldn't want to listen to all of his music. Some of it I really do adore, some of it much less so. But I just think he's a good guy and an important person to have around. I love the fact that he's excited by new music. He loves getting involved with, young artists and helping them out. He had worked with Brandi Carlile, I think, on the odd track a long time ago, and obviously, had a relationship with her of, songwriting rapport with her, and then they got together in the studio, including with Bernie Taupin, who was there with them, and a few others who helped kind of concoct this whole album in the studio. And well, there it is, number one, and lots of good reviews. Well done, Elton. I am thrilled for you. So I want to just talk a little bit about what Spotify have sent out called Loud and Clear. Now, you remember that in November, December, it's the end of November, beginning of December, Spotify makes a big hoo-ha of sending out Spotify Wrapped. And, well, for a couple of years, I've looked at Spotify Wrapped. I have shrugged my shoulders and thought, what is this for? Am I supposed to get excited by this sort of strange nonsense that has been produced for every single individual artist on Spotify, and then in a slightly different way for every single listener on Spotify? I'm not quite sure it's worth the trouble they go to produce it. So it's interesting that end of March, beginning of April, it's almost like, the end of the financial year, beginning of the next financial year, out comes this thing called Loud and Clear. And it's basically loads of information. And it starts with this little statement. It says, artists deserve clarity about the economics of music streaming. I agree with that statement, but I would also say that Spotify are really bad at giving you clarity. So yes, worthy ambition, which I think is nearly always not the thing that they manage to achieve. It's not the output in the end. This site aims to increase transparency by sharing new data on Spotify's royalty payments and breaking down the global streaming economy, the players and the process. And then it's got top 10 takeaways. So it's like We're not going to really give you the data. We're just going to give you our conclusions on the data. And this is the kind of thing we've got here. Okay, a record $10 billion payout, it says. For another year, Spotify was the highest paying retailer globally, paying the music industry over $10 billion in 2024. Incidentally, this all refers to the year 2024. This brings total lifetime payouts to nearly $60 billion. So they're the highest paying retailer globally. Well, that's because they're the biggest player. You know, it's like, so they make these huge claims, but actually, when you stand back, it's obvious, isn't it? It stands to reason. Spotify paid out more than any other retailer or streaming service in 2024, but that's not all. Our $10 billion payout is the largest in music industry history, more than any single retailer has ever paid in a year, and over 10 times the contribution of the largest record store at the height of the CD era. Big bloody deal. If the industry is growing, then of course it's going to be a big payout. And if they've got a huge market share of the industry, then that's pretty obvious to me. So you see what I mean when I said at the beginning, this tends to be, it feels like what we've got here is just a very long, advertorial about Spotify, dressed up as information. Here we go to the next one. Streaming's rising tide. In the decade from 2014 to 2024, Spotify's yearly payout to the music industry increased 10 times from 1 billion to over 10 billion. Okay, so what's that saying? It says that Spotify has grown. Yes. Spotify has been on a mission to get the world to value music again. Really? Many people, I think, would say that Spotify has been on a mission to get the world to devalue music again. But, hey, let's just go with this for the time being. Hold. Let's not, don't switch off. And the system we've built together is working. Since the low point, I wonder when the low point was. Since the low point, global recorded revenue has more than doubled to almost 30 billion in 2024. Today, there are well over 500 million paying listeners across all music streaming services. Okay, that's good. Great. What else have we got? Let's go on to the next one. Paradox of the modern music industry. There are more artists making more money on Spotify than ever before. In fact, the number of artists generating royalties at every threshold on this site, I don't know what a threshold is actually, from $1,000 to 10 million per year, has at least tripled since 2017. 10 years ago, the top artists on Spotify generated just over $5 million. Today, there are over 200 artists who have passed that threshold. $5 million. 200 artists have earned more than $5 million. Okay, that's ever, I suppose. I don't know if that's good or bad. And the point is, for somebody like me, and for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of other rather smaller Spotify for artists, that just feels like I'm being told about something that is ridiculously out of reach. Okay, we can aspire and we can have ambition, but, do you know what's grown even faster? The number of uploaders to Spotify, which is now nearly 12 million. Now, this is actually a really interesting number, and it's a number that I've looked for before and not found. Looking back to the peak of the CD era, only a few thousand artists had their music on the shelves of record stores. The paradox? Streaming has allowed millions to easily share their music globally, but the sheer volume of uploaders means the fraction who find success appears smaller over time. Thanks to streaming, more artists than ever before are generating royalties at every career stage. What? More than at any time in music history, and we think that's what really matters. Okay, so what they're saying here is what we know, which is, I think it's good to have that number. It's 12 million. 12 million people like me upload music to Spotify, or certainly uploaded in 2024. 12 million people. It's quite a lot, isn't it? And they're saying that's really good because back in the record store era, you wouldn't have 12 million tracks in a record shop. No, well, of course you wouldn't. But what that means is the sheer volume of uploaders means that the fraction who find success is smaller and smaller. That is the nub of it, isn't it? It's not a paradox. It's what modern technology has enabled, and what Spotify are doing is just reaping the benefit of it. I know they think that they're encouraging people like me to carry on making more music and earning a fortune. Well, I reckon, I'll be really honest with you. I think over the whole 6-7 years I have been doing this, I think I've earned less than $3,000, I reckon. So I'm not quite in the, $5 million bracket yet. But obviously, it's only a matter of time, isn't it? What else we got? Now, listen to this. The 100,000th artist. Over the past decade, the 100,000th ranked artist on Spotify has seen their generated royalties multiply by over 10 times, increasing from under $600 in 2014 to almost $6,000 in 2024. So what are they saying here? This is the 100. They're saying, the whole pyramid is kind of going up, if you see what I mean. But the problem is, at the bottom, there are even more people earning almost nothing. As a point of comparison, at the peak of the CD era, Tower Records carried 50,000 CDs from thousands of artists in total. However, over 100,000 artists are generating thousands of royalties on Spotify alone. Okay, they're desperate to tell us how good they are for the music industry. And this is the thing that I'm not sure I really buy. I am cynical about this because I think their payouts are minuscule, and they seem to be reinforcing a very steep pyramid that has, Ed Sheeran and Taylor Swift at the top, and thousands and millions of people getting virtually nothing at the bottom. Okay. And also, they do have a tendency to write these things in this kind of irritating way, which is like, I'm going to give you a fact. I've gone through all the data. I'm going to give you a fact that makes almost no sense to you at all, but might sound a bit impressive. Another record year for songwriters. I'm on to the next page. Spotify paid out nearly $4.5 billion to publishing rights holders who represent songwriters over the last 2 years. So this is the amount of money they have paid out to publishers. Songwriters, through their publishers, PROs and collecting societies, are generating record-breaking revenues driven by streaming services. Well, that's great. Good. I'm delighted about that. But of course, again, that stands to reason. If they're this big in the music industry, then actually they have to do that. Of course they have to. So I'm not quite sure why they're making such a big song and dance fair. Okay, where do we go to next? New music millionaires. In 2024, nearly 1,500 artists generated over $1 million in royalties, and are likely to have generated much more, overall. So basically, they're saying yes, okay, they got $1 million just from Spotify. So if you add up all the others, the other streaming platforms, I suppose the Apples and the Deezers and Amazons, all the rest, then it could be that they've made $4 million. That is very spurious indeed, because of course Spotify is by far the biggest of all of these. This isn't just a story about household names, this 1,500 artists who got over $1 million. 80% of these artists didn't have a song that reached the Spotify Global Daily Top 50 chart in 2024. So it's not just about legacy artists either, as the majority didn't even launch their careers until 2010 or later. Over 80% of them are actively touring artists with at least one ticketed event in 2024. Now, that's quite interesting. So they're saying several things here. There are 1,500 artists who got over $1 million. They're saying 80% of these didn't have any track at all that was like the one standout hit that made a global top 50. And they're saying 80% of them are touring artists, so that really helps. That's an important point to make. And many of them have only sort of relatively recently started their careers. Okay, that I do think that is interesting. But again, it just makes me feel a little bit like, where we go to. Then it talks a bit about royalties, and the fact that actually royalties come from all over the world, so you're not necessarily just earning money from the country you live in. I think that's pretty obvious. Music is multilingual. I think kind of more of the same point, if you don't mind me saying. Artists who earned that $1 million had music recorded in 17 different languages. So basically, we're talking about a bunch of artists who are very multicultural, multinational, multilingual. So that's good. Okay, can't argue with that. The sustained rise of indies. Now, I'm an indie, I guess. We're talking about the independent artists and labels. In 2024, they generated more than $5 billion from Spotify, representing about half of total Spotify royalties for another year. So the little person who is not necessarily with a big record company, doing their own thing, they did well. Okay. Now, here's the kind of thing that just does my head in. In 2024, for the first time ever, an artist who received 1 in every million streams on Spotify generated over $10,000 on average. Why give us that information in such a convoluted and difficult to understand way? I do know why. This obfuscation, I think. So if somebody's come up with this ridiculous kind of stat, let's just say that again. An artist who received 1 in every million streams, so was getting, 1/1,000,000th of the entire market, that was earning them about $10,000. Is that useful? I don't think so. At the end of 2024, Spotify's all-time payouts to the music industry total nearly $60 billion. That's lovely. And then actually what they've got here is the process, how the money flows. One of the questions we get asked most often is, how do artists and songwriters get paid? And then they've got some videos here about how publishing works, etc., which is great. And then they've got a little thing you can have fun with, where you can pop your own numbers of streams or your own monthly listeners into a little calculator and find out kind of where you're ranked in the world. I did this. Should we do this again? Okay. My most streamed song, this is what they're asking for. It says, enter any monthly listener count for an artist or an all-time stream count for a song. Okay. So let's put it, my all-time most streamed song is Night Owl. And let me just see, I think it has about, let's call it 118,000 streams. I'm just going to put that in here. And what it's going to do, 118,000 streams is tell me, and I'll show you this just for fun. So what it says is loading now to tell me that a track with 118,000 all-time streams puts it not too far out of the top 5 million tracks on Spotify globally. So I'm about 5,360,000th. That's great, isn't it? I think we'll leave it there. You have been delightful holding on to this nonsense from Spotify. It does drive me a bit crazy, trying to make a living, trying to build an audience, trying to kind of get on with this behemoth of an organisation that gives us this every now and then, kind of presents us this data, always with their very particular, rather unusual and sometimes completely incomprehensible twist on it. Thank you, Spotify. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you next time with more nonsense from the music industry. Take care. Bye-bye.